Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. What's going down, brother?
Yeah, I'm very well. As you know, every Wednesday, Inner Circle College right before this. So I was on there with those fine men, playing at a great level, some great wins, some awesome lessons as well from those guys. So yeah, always fills me up to be on those calls.
Yeah, those working with those guys. So for those that don't know, the Inner Circle is one of our one-year mastermind programs, the highest level. And these guys are playing a big game in their life. They've all gone through the activation method for relationships, and they've gone from deactivated to activated, focusing on their relationships. And now they've expanded. Tim, something that was interesting. I was talking to somebody, actually another call that I was leading for the guys in the activation method. And the conversation was about the activation method. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about today, but I was reminding the guys that they're going through the activation method for relationships that's designed. But originally we had, and we're introducing, and we still teach all of the 5 territories through the activation method and on through the brotherhood and the inner circle. So for guys that aren't familiar with one of our programs, that's self, health, wealth, relationships, which is the one we're talking about today, and business. So it's really interesting. So a lot of guys started throwing more questions out around their business and other areas of their life that were also being affected, which was great to see.
Yeah, always is. Always is.
So Tim, one of the things that was interesting is I've gotten a couple notes recently, and they're around the same vein. And I'll set the scene here for a second. What's happening is there's men that are out there that have been in what we would call kind of deactivated state. And now their wife has just had a baby, right? There's a new baby that's in the mix, and things at the house have changed. The wife has become further disconnected, withdrawn, and they're not sure what to do here. They're feeling like less of a man. So I want to talk about that today.
Yeah, let's do it. Interestingly enough, obviously you know this, but I guess the listeners may or may not. I don't know. But prior to the Powerful Man in a previous life, the business that I ran then was called Fitness for Mom, which just was, as it might sound, for women, ironically. And what the company used to do is it used to support women with pre and postnatal fitness. But the more relevant one here that I'm thinking of is the postnatal side of things, because what it did was it provided boot camps throughout the UK, and these mums would come with their babies and they'd be led through a series of just like a workout program, really, outdoors in the park. And some of the conversations that you used to overhear, it really opened my eyes to a woman's perspective, right, on how she feels and what she's going through after the baby has been born from, and obviously you're familiar with this too, but those sleepless nights and the effect that has on her in particular, as well as in the guy then getting up and going out to work and she's left with the baby all day. And these were career-driven women as well. Like, these women were people who were either had given up companies to have a baby, or the company was still going, but they'd pulled away from it. Or they were more often than not in positions of leadership within what they did, right? So then for them to just become quote unquote a mum, right? And lose that side of themselves, it could really contribute to them feeling quite down, right? Especially when you throw in the hormones and the sense of isolation that can sometimes come with it. So at these particular classes that, like I said, happened outdoors with other mums, for them, they'd often describe it as one of the moments in the day that really just transformed their mood, because they were outside and had the fresh air. I mean, these women had turned up even in the rain, right? They just put the rain cover on the pram. The baby had been there, and these women would just go for it, even when in the rain. So it showed you snow even. I can remember classes in snow. And it just shows you how much it meant for these women and their mood to then reclaim their body and their body image and the self-image and do something for themselves and be around other women and so on. And I think as guys, I definitely would not have known as much what a woman goes through after giving birth, having not been in that class and witnessed to some of the conversations. And I think then if I would have been one of these guys who had had the child and was going out to work, and I was going out to work and I was tired too, and I was working hard, and I was coming home, and my partner, my wife, whatever, just wasn't really giving me any attention. Um, yeah, I can see how you can just start to miss each other, right? Because the conversation for her is, holy crap, I just need to get my identity back. I need to get myself back. And the conversation, she didn't really have much to give, right? And the conversation for him is, hang on a minute, I need to get us back. Like can't just all be around the baby for some guys for the most part, because I also know from what I've been told that a lot of guys kind of struggle to bond with the baby in the first kind of 3, 6, whatever number of months in the beginning until they can interact with it, right? So yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean it is, and I've been through it, so I see it a little differently because I've been through it with my wife, and they talk about it a lot with postpartum depression. And so what's happening to a
Mm,
lot of women is they're having, of course, there's the identity play, which you mentioned, which is definitely happening for many women, depending on whether it's their first child, second, third, etc. But also the flood of hormones that are in there changing their
mhm,
bodies. So hormones are going to affect not only their physical body, but also their moods, right? It's also going to affect their mental state and so many other things. And my wife and I went through this. So we had our last child, right? We had her in January, just as the pandemic started, which was kind of crazy to kind of experience the beginning of it when no one really knew what was going on. And then after that, my wife fell into kind of a fog, a cloud, a depression. And as a man, my natural instinct was try to solve the problems. As I looked at, okay, maybe we bought a new home. Great, that might solve this. Right? Okay, that's not enough. We got to buy another home on the other side of the United States. That'll solve it. That wasn't the issue, right? Okay, we're going to trying to solve these things. You go into the solving mode because we're not going through the depression, right? My wife is consistently in this state. Now, again, my situation is a little exaggerated because there's a pandemic. There's no place for her to bond with other women. Nobody knows what's going on. This is early stages when everybody was scared. Like you looked at people walking across the street and you're like, I don't want to be near you. And so for a lot of these women, what they're falling into this depression, most women don't know they're in it. It's kind of that idea that, well, for men, when men become depressed, they don't realize they're in a depressed state. People around them can see it clearer, but even then you can hide it and you can just figure out something's just off, right? My wife was needing to sleep more. Now, of course, she was tired, but there was more than that. It was kind of the pull the covers over your head type sleep, just being in a dark room. And it's really moody. It was really tough for me as a man and I had these conversations with you, Tim, is I'm going through trying to figure this out. It's weighing on me. It's starting to bleed into my ability to produce for the business, right? For things that you and I are doing. It's bleeding into my social life, travel, things that that I had on my calendar. And it really starts to affect the mind space. So I go into typical guy, right? I go into problem solving mode. And that's what a lot of men do. And when we go into problem solving mode, that starts to really screw with our identity, right? Our identity of a leader, of a man who's significant. But now we have this woman at our house with a new baby that we need to protect, feed, all of those things that come naturally for a guy. And you're right, bonding for a lot of guys doesn't happen as naturally. That's because the hormone that your wife is getting is oxytocin,
mhm.
right? She gets flooded with it, right? And you don't as a man. You get it, right? The more that's why as soon as you have a baby, they recommend the guy takes his shirt off, holds the baby close to the skin, has as much skin contact as possible because it actually releases more of that oxytocin. But it goes to show you how powerful these hormones are. And these hormones are really going to affect the woman. Now, what affects the man is identity, his feeling of significance, right? You're not having sex, right? You're not having sex after the baby, right? Especially if it's a natural birth or if it's a C-section, it's even longer, right? Because the woman can't do that kind of activity. So guys sitting here going, okay, I'm not having any sex. My wife's depressed, right? Here I am, everything I'm trying to do. Nobody in the house is sleeping, all these things start to compile and the man starts to think it's his fault. And this is where you have a flood, like a convergence of issues. Now, luckily for me, I had the triadic connection on my side, right? I had the alpha rising sign, the alpha decompression. Of course, I had to modify them during these things, but most men don't. So now you have a guy who's been deactivated in the home, right? So he's going to double down. Even I tried to do more, but do more nice guy things to help out and to solve the problem, which the woman is just, she's struggling for help. And if the guy doesn't have the triad of connection, which for those who aren't aware, it's a three-pronged approach. It's the clean slate method, the hidden motives technique, and the live like a king system that we teach through the activation method for relationships. With that three-pronged approach allows you to kind of reset the clock, so to speak, with your wife each and every time, which is what I did, consistently resetting it with her. And that allowed me to navigate that. But if you didn't have that, which most men don't, they haven't been through the program, you're really lost. And guys start going into deer mode, right? The woman says, the woman's complains about feeling gloomy. Let's just use that as an example. It's a common one. So she's feeling a little dark, a little gloomy, a little down. And she might say something like, oh, the garbage again, maybe the trash, or you say the bins, wouldn't have been taken out. And he starts to defend himself. Oh, I'm working so much, because I'm not sleeping. I got to get up at odd hours. I'm trying to help out with the baby. He goes into defending mode. He's explaining what he's doing. He's making excuses, but he's also reacting, which is the last thing that she is able to handle, right? She is just barely hanging on by a thread, taking care of the baby and kind of herself, but she's not taking care of herself. So now he comes into deer mode, defends, explains, excuses, and reacts. And that compounds the problem. Now there's a bigger wedge. She now feels, I now have to be the mom, but now I have to be the man, the alpha in this marriage to protect myself because my husband can't handle it. And it's not that the man can't handle it, Tim. It's just that he hasn't been given the tools that we teach in the activation method. He hasn't been given the tools to communicate with his wife, to assure his wife, to be what we call the lighthouse, which if you guys aren't familiar with that analogy, there's a previous podcast where we dive into it. So he doesn't have that. So she just doesn't feel safe. And I just feel so bad, not only for the women and their children, because they're growing up in an environment like the baby's first, feelings of this world is a house divided. But I feel bad for the men. Like the guys are doing the best that they can with the information that they have, right? They're struggling so hard. And again, I have all the tools, and it was still a difficult passage for me to get through. And I can't imagine what it would be like, Tim, for these guys that haven't had the trainings and haven't, what we say, stepped to the line and been able to utilize these tools and leverage them for themselves.
Yeah, in those classes, the women used to complain about the men a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. And I think they got so much out of it as well because other women would then vent too. And then they didn't feel as bad about the feelings they had about what was going on.
Community.
Yeah, it was. And it was kind of, I was going to say it was kind of shocking to hear some of the opinions. At the same time, like you said, in some cases they're barely hanging on. Like some women would show up after having no sleep and said, look, I just had to get out of the house. I could not stay in that house all day. This is the one time I'm going to get out of the house and be surrounded by other adults and be able to have an adult conversation. Until this evening when my husband comes home and I'm too exhausted to even have a conversation with him.
Yeah, it's, we have the brotherhood and the powerful man. They almost need a sisterhood, right? Somebody you can relate to. Guys that come through to our program, Tim, these are all high-performing businessmen who are coming in thinking that, okay, maybe it's just me. And they're finding a brotherhood of amazing guys who pass what I call the beer test, right? Guys you'd want to go get a beer with from around the world who are out doing amazing things, who are bettering themselves for their families, themselves, their communities, and their businesses. And it's the same thing for these women. And just like anybody that's in a depressed state, this with your fitness background, you get your body moving, endorphins start kicking in, feel good. Again, hormones start coming. But that doesn't change what's happening in the home, right? No. That can even sometimes separate the home because now she's getting her good feelings elsewhere, not
Mm.
from her man. She's getting them from the trainer, right? Or this community of women. And there can be a transference, which I'm sure you've experienced in some way, of these feelings these women have of being protected or sexual feelings towards their trainer, towards the professional
Mhm.
who's in front of them, that source of authority, if they're not getting it at home. And this is a very
Mhm.
common thing. In fact, hormones are so strong, Tim, that you'll find out when you and Amelia have your first child, is when you go through, if you do prenatal classes and things like that, they go over this multiple times, that for the woman, that after birth, if she can't take it, for her to walk out of the house. And the reason they say she should walk, which sounds horrible, like why would you leave a baby in the house? That's ridiculous, right? There's so many things that can go wrong. But actually, the hardest thing or the most dangerous thing for a baby is the woman, because she gets so fed up that her hormones have taken over, that a lot of women, and guys can do this too, can resort to shaking the baby, picking it up and shaking it. Why don't you go to sleep? Why don't you? And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they're at the brink, right? They're at the brink where they
Mm.
can't control themselves. And this is happening for men in their relationships with women. I'm sure some guys listening to this who have older kids are like, oh, wow, maybe I didn't realize that. My wife didn't realize, by the way, and I never brought it up about her depression, but it wasn't until she was out of the fog that she could look back in retrospect and go, you know what? And she won't mind me talking about this, but I had, postpartum depression. I was like, yeah, I think you did. And we were able to look back at that. And, she actually thanked me for the way I handled the situation. She thanked me for the way that I showed up as the man of the house, providing, making sure things were taken care of for her and having that leadership role, and also being support, right? I changed diapers and things like that. It's not just, she has to be the woman that has to do everything. It's not the way it works in my house. But being there and being the support and being able to use the hidden motives technique, so she feels heard, seen, and desired, even though we can't have sex at the time, but I can still make her feel sexy, right? Using things, the live like a king system, which allows me to keep keep my butt in check, so to speak, and allows me to keep rising in my journey despite what's going on around me. And again, guys, this is where you have the opportunity to really be the lighthouse that does not turn off because it's hard. Right? You're getting like 4 hours of sleep, right? You're not getting laid. Worse, there's no connection. And your wife's
Mm.
upset, she's depressed. And this doesn't go on for days. This goes on for a long time, months. And you're like, how much more of this do I want to take? But if you're the lighthouse and you go from deer, which again is defend, excuse, explain, react, you go to wolf, right? If you look at the logo above Tim, if you're watching this, the wolf, the rose in its mouth, wolf is wise, open, loving, and fierce. Use the wisdom to get the skill sets. If you don't have the skill sets that are taught in the activation method, get them now. They're going to apply, guys, throughout your life. Just go get them. I'm just not going to beat around the bush. Use the wisdom, but the openness to be able to have conversations that matter with your wife, like these women Tim's talking about having at the park, right? Have that openness. And then the L for loving, not only for that baby, but for your wife as well. And also that lovingness goes like, man, you just created a miracle. What a miracle that for 9 months, roughly, you carried this baby around inside of you as your hormones were rapidly changing. And then this flood of hormones comes out that you have no control over after the birth, and you're still pushing through. It's pretty incredible. But also the fierceness to be the man, the fierceness to be the lighthouse that doesn't dim, that doesn't go out. It's interesting, Tim. I was talking to one of our advisors. For those guys that don't know, we have advisors, both male and female. We brought female advisors in basically because they're awesome, but they also are able to give the men a female's perspective, right, of what's going on, right, in their marriage and in their lives. And I was talking to one of the advisors about this, Tim, and what she was saying was basically like, look, there's nothing sexier for a woman that when she's in the throes of things, when she can't control her emotions, to have a man who's steadfast, who has a man that has these tools, the disposal. This particular woman, she was or went through a divorce, and she told me, she's like, Doug, I don't like to admit that. I certainly wouldn't tell this to my ex, but I wonder if he had had the powerful man, if we'd still be together today. Think about that. That's a powerful thing for a woman to be in retrospect, right? Hindsight's 2020 when you look back at life. But if my husband had had these tools, we probably would still be together. And I share that with you guys because if you find yourself in this situation where your wife's postpartum, here's what you want to do. All right, Tim, jump in at any time here. What you want to do is realize what's going on. Recognize and be honest with yourself if you're being a deer. Are you defending yourself? Are you excusing things that are going on? Are you explaining? And are you reacting? And if the answer is yes, then you need to transition rapidly, not only for yourself, but for your wife and for your children. You just got to do it. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, guys. You just have to. It's going to be investment in time and investment in capital. You're going to have to do the work, right? You just have to. It's part of the game. But this is how you're going to be able to pull this plane up from a nosedive to an actual trajectory that you want to have. You also get to sit down with your wife and see how you can help her. Ask her, hey, is there anything I can do to help you out? And she may say nothing. Don't do this from a place of being needy, but do this from a place of love. Again, the wolf being open and loving. And just check in with her. Because odds are for a lot of women that I've talked to that are in this state, they just feel like they're crazy. They don't know what's going on. They know they can't control the crying. They can't control the hormones. All of a sudden they get massively sad and they start weeping and they don't know why. And they're scared to share it with us men because they're starting to think, crap, maybe I'm crazy. But if he finds out I'm crazy, he's going to leave because I wouldn't be with me. And this whole story goes on in their head. So they have to hide out because there's fear. There's lack of safety that's there. And you as the man, you get to step in and provide that. Be that anchor, be that lighthouse, be the wolf and show up. Use a triad of connection. Use that skill set to allow yourself to elevate.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The only thing that came to my mind is the benefit that those women would get from being with other women in a similar position, outdoors, doing exercise. It's kind of like such a great recipe, right? So obviously I wouldn't know what was in your area or anything like that. But yeah, the other thing that comes to mind for me is to be able to see if you can encourage that kind of support network and self-care, because a lot of it was that's the other thing they'd say, look, this is the only thing I get to do for me.
Yeah.
Right. They were doing it for them. And then, they'd go for a bit of a coffee afterwards and things like that. But as soon as they did, they were straight away feeding the baby and everything was about the baby. They put the baby down, they'd be crying. You know how it goes. This was that one thing they did for them. And I think just that little feeling of self-control as well, like they had some control over their life, they could do something for them. They'd even share how tough it was for them to get to the class, because just getting the baby ready on time and in the car, and to be at a class on time that starts at a particular time, right? It's going to start regardless. And they even went to those kind of lengths to make sure that everything was taken care of. It's just incredible thinking about it, what they would actually go through, even when they were at sleepless night, everything, and just be there, even in the snow.
Yeah.
Like, even in the snow. That's insane. So, yeah, I think if you are in this position, the one thing I'd add on top of what you've said, Doug, is encouraging that kind of experience.
Yeah, definitely. And what I would recommend is don't push her towards it.
No.
Open her eyes to it. There's tons of programs that are out there, online communities. If you're in a rural area that doesn't have one of the programs like Tim was talking about here, there are other avenues. But I'll tell you, the best thing that I did, Tim, was take ownership of my side of the street and leadership, and make sure that I was leading me in the best way possible to navigate my family.
100%.
Gentlemen, as we always say in the moment of insight, take massive action. I'd love to know what you got from this, whether you're in the situation or not. You might have saw something else within your relationship or within your life. I'd encourage you to head over to the Facebook group. It's free, right? We're actually doing a live training in there in just a little bit. So there's tons of guys like you, over 3,000 men, and share in that community like we talk about. And as always, take action. And we'll see you next time on The Powerful Man Show.